Hello, good afternoon, student. Dear student, today I am going to start next passage of the lesson, The Portrait of a Lady. My grandmother and I were good friends. The narrator is describing and saying that his grandmother and he were good friends. My parents left me with her. It means the narrator's parents left the narrators with her Hermes with grandmothers when they both grandmother and the narrator went to live in the city and were constantly when they means when the parents of the narrator went to live in the city, then they left grandmother and the narrator in the village, and we were constantly together. It means the narrator and grandmother lived constantly together. Grandmother used to wake me. He is saying that grandmother used to wake the narrator up in the morning and get him ready for school. She said her morning prayer. Grandmother said her morning prayer in the sing song, monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed. While grandmother bathed and dressed to the narrator in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. It means in the grandmother regularly saying the prayer, morning prayer, when she bathed and dressed to the writer, to the narrator, in this way that the narrator is saying that my grandmother would listen, and if she was thinking, she thought that I will, it means the narrator will listen the prayer and get know it by heart. She learned it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn. The narrator is saying that I listened the prayer of my grandmother because I love the voice of my grandmother, but I never bothered, I never thought to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate. My grandmother fetched my wooden slate, which she had already washed. She had already washed the slate and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, or tie them all in a bundle and tie, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. It means my grandmother totally, completely get to reading. She always took my slate, pen, tie, all things and tie them all in bundle and handed it to the writer. After a breakfast of a thick, after breakfast, grandmother stale chapati with the little butter. Grandmother who gave me stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on the chapati. We went to school. We went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her. We went to school and grandmother carried several steel chapatis with her for the village dogs. It means grandmother always daily went to school and she carried several steel chapatis, steel bread for the village dogs. My grandmother always went to school with me. My grandmother, narrator is saying that his grandmother always went to school with the narrator because the school was attached with the temple. Because the school was attached to the temple. Peri, the priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer also. While the children sat while the children sat in the row on either side, means both sides of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the singing the prayer in the chorus. Chorus means half in this side and half other sides. My grandmother sat inside reading the scripture. The narrator saying that his grandmother sat inside and reading the scriptures, it means religious books, when we had both finished, when the grandmother and the narrator finished the school and or the we would walk back. Grandmother and the narrator walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us. In this time the village dog meet them at the nearby the temple, door of the temple. They followed, the dog followed them their home, growling and fighting with each other for bed, or for the chapatis, for the bread, and we threw to them. It means the grandmother and the narrator threw the chapati to the dogs. The dogs were fighting to each other at that time, one another at that time, growling and fighting. When my mother were comfortably settled in city, when my parents were comfortably settled in the city, when the narrator is saying that when his parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. It means the narrator and his grandmother also settled in the city. That was a turning point of their relationship, of their friendship. It was the turning point uh, in the relationship, in the friendship between grandmother and the narrator. Although we shared the same, while the grandmother and the narrator shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school, but his grandmother, the grandmother of the narrator, was not able to go with the narrator school, and just like of the village. I used to go to an English school because the narrator used to go in the English school by motor bus, or there were no dogs in the street, and now there were no dogs in the street, and she took the feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. In the city house, the grandmother feeding the sparrows. Sparrows means small birds in the courtyard of the city house. As the years rolled, means as the years passed by, we saw less of each other. It means both the grandmother and the narrator saw each other very less. For some time, she continued to wake me. For some time, the grandmother continued to wake the writer, to wake the narrator up, and to get him ready for school. When I came back, when the narrator came back from the school, she would ask the narrator what the teacher had taught to him. And the grandmother always asked the narrator what the teacher taught him. I would tell her English, and when the narrator, the writer, the author is saying that he would tell her English word and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity or Archimedes principle, the world being ground, etc. This made her unhappy. When grandmother listened that what did the teacher taught to him, the grandmother made her happy. In these words, in this condition, the grandmother became upset. The grandmother became unhappy, sad. She could not help with me less. It means the grandmother was not able, could not able to help the narrator with his lesson. She did not believe in the things. Grandmother did not believe in the things they taught at the English school, and was distressed that there was no teaching about God. Grandmother was distressed. Grandmother was sad because there was no any teaching about God and the scripture in the school. One day, one day the narrator announced that we were being given music lesson. The narrator said to the grandmother, I had being given the music lesson. The grandmother was very disturbed and upset. To her music had lewd association. It was the monopoly of harlots and beggars, and not meant for gentle flock. The monopoly of harlots and beggars, and not meant the gentle flock. She had nothing but her silence mean disapproval. It means When grandmother was bilkul silent, it means her disapproval that ki I was not we should I should the narrator should not learn such type of the things there, or she rarely talked to me after that, and after that the grandmother rarely talked to the narrators. It means there is a separation day by day, and a turning point in the relationship and the brand friendship between the writer and his grandmother. When I went up to university, I was given a room for my own. The narrator, the author is saying that when he went up to university, he was given a room, separate room for him. The common link of friendship was now snapped, and the common link of the friendship between the narrator and his grandmother was broken, and my grandmother accepted her solution with resignation, or it means she was now accepted that if there was my grandmother accepted means she was accepted her solution and with resignation, it means they were now separated and they are not good friends. She rarely left her spinning, it means the grandmother rarely left her spinning wheels to talk to anyone, or from sunrise to sunset. Otherwise, from sunrise to sunset, grandmother sat by her wheel, spinning the wheel and reciting prayer regularly, whole day. Only in the afternoon, the grandmother relaxed for a while to feed the sparrow. Only she took the relax at that afternoon, when grandmother relaxed for a while only to feed the sparrows, while she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, and she breaking the breads in the little bits. A hundred of the little birds collected round her, creating a vegetables bedlam of the chirpings. It means the sparrows and the birds collected there with chirpings, and some came and sat. Perched means sat on her, on the legs of the grandmother, on the other soldiers of the grandmother. Some sat on the head of the grandmothers, but grandmother always smiled but never sued them. Grandmother never sued the birds from her leg, her shoulder, her head. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day of her. It means at that moment, grandmother passed this moment very happily. She became very happy at that half an hour of the day of her, when she fed the when she fed the sparrows, the birds, the feed. Yes, then listen this video carefully and try to understand of the lesson. Thank you.